Powered by Riverside FM.
Welcome to another edition of Unconventional Playbook. Please hit that like and subscribe button. Winter Warrior Edition. Minnesota Vikings play the Chicago Bears tomorrow night in Minneapolis. It will be a complete whiteout. Minnesota Vikings will be wearing their Winter Warrior uniforms. It should be nice, man. It should be really nice. I wanted to jump on here to discuss just self-reflecting at where the Minnesota Vikings are and looking at this year's free agent class, man. I've been watching football for a long time, since the free agency was instituted in the NFL back in 1993. I've been trying to research and look at just prominent free agent classes that have come in the NFL to specific teams. And I honestly can't find a more impactful free agent class than what the Minnesota Vikings brought in this year. This is a good debate, because if you know of another free agent class that has really impacted another NFL team, put it in the comments. I mean, I've done my research, and there are a few, but when you go through and you look at the Minnesota Vikings free agent class this year and how impactful it is, I mean, my goodness. Everybody, it seems, that Kwesi Adolfo Mensah brings in makes an impact on our football team in some way. And I'm not talking about, an impact here or there, but I'm talking about just a serious, impactful role on the team. You talk about Blake Cashman. Think about this. Blake Cashman, Minnesota guy, played at the University of Minnesota, played with the Texans. The knock on him was, when we signed him, was that he's injury prone, and he missed 2 games this season. Guess what? We lost those 2 games. We're undefeated with Blake Cashman in the lineup, in the middle, anchoring that defense. And I know a lot of was made because he was brought in, and Ivan Pace Jr. had the green dot last year. Blake Cashman got the green dot this year. And he's just been damn near flawless in the middle. Again, undefeated record with him in the lineup. Unbelievable signing for the Minnesota Vikings, bringing a hometown kid home. Then you talk about bringing in a guy that everyone had on the scrap heap. And I keep saying that because it was specific. I remember when the day that Sam Darnold was signed, people were upset that the Minnesota Vikings, number one, had interest, and number two, that they signed him. Even though they signed him on the cheap, I mean, $10 million, not a bad deal, especially when you were paying Kirk Cousins up the wazoo. Kirk Cousins goes to Atlanta Falcons, and Sam Darnold comes in, and I just remember all of the critiques and the critics that everybody was throwing out there. And I had a few. Latrey had a few. I mean, Patrick Buchanan had a few. There was nobody that thought in their right mind that Sam Darnold would be, honestly, in the MVP conversation, because that's where he is right now, leading the Minnesota Vikings to a 11-2 start, just coming off a game where he went head-to-head with the previous quarterback and Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins did some things here. Not enough, but he did some things. Kirk Cousins threw 0 touchdowns. Sam Darnold, 5. Who would have thought that? Another impactful free agent signing. I mean, if Sam Darnold's not on this team right now, are we 11-2? I mean, he's a big part of that. Had his struggles in the second half of the Green Bay Packer game, had his struggles against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and this thing could have went south quick. This thing could have went pear-shaped pretty quick. But it didn't. KOC got him under control, and Sam Darnold is playing some of his best football ever. Can you think of another free agency class from top to bottom in the history of the league. I know there's a lot of people have been talking about this is the best free agent class ever in Minnesota Vikings history. I mean, that goes without saying. Like, that's the easy talk. That's easy. But is it the best free agency class ever in the history of the league? Think about that. If there's another one out there, UP Nation, put it in the comments. Then they go, Stefan Gilmore. They needed help in the secondary. Kyrie Jackson, the untimely death of the late Kyrie Jackson. Very unfortunate. But the secondary was pretty thin. And then you go out and you get a guy like Stefan Gilmore, who had his choices of places to go. And KOC said when he arrived, we just wanted, our priority was to just show him the culture here with the Minnesota Vikings. And let me tell you this, UP Nation. The word culture, good culture, great culture is really getting around when people talk about the Minnesota Vikings right now. I hear it on various teams. Whenever it comes up, they always talk about how great the culture is with the Minnesota Vikings. And in a season next year where you're coming in with a lot of salary cap flexibility, that narrative is a really good thing to have. But back to Stefan Gilmore. We bring in former Defensive Player of the Year, Stefan Gilmore, who's not even close to what he was when he was Defensive Player of the Year, but he's a pretty solid cornerback. And how I know he's pretty solid is because when you go to the All-22, people just aren't throwing his way. That's a lot of respect. Doesn't have the jets, doesn't have the legs that he had back in the day. Every now and then he gives up a play that maybe he shouldn't give up. But when you look at the alternative of what we could have went with and what we probably would have had to go with for the majority of the season, for Kwesi to go out and get Stefan Gilmore, who was laying on his couch looking at options, it's another great addition to the Minnesota Vikings free agency class. Is there another class out there, UP Nation? Let me know. Jonathan Grenard, who leads the NFL according to PFF in quarterback pressures. So that means, he's really not always getting home, but he's causing havoc for offensive lines coming off the edge. He's causing havoc, putting a lot of pressure on quarterbacks. This is another guy that basically came in and replaced Danielle Hunter. And Danielle Hunter's having a great season with the Texans. I'm not going to even sit here in front on that. He's having a great season with the Texans, but I'm going to tell you right now, Jonathan Grenard fits the system a little bit better. He fits the system with the Minnesota Vikings a little bit better. He's a little bit better in coverage. And he's a little bit better at coming off angles and pressuring the quarterback. Now, Danielle Hunter can get to the QB, man. He's a stud. I'm not throwing Danielle under the bus. I love Danielle. But I'm just saying for the fit in what B-Flow wants to do, Jonathan Grenard is a little bit better. Another home run for the Minnesota Vikings. And I'm telling you right now, when you think of these free agents, everybody that I've been talking about right now has been impactful in some way or another. Everything Kwesi seems to touch right now is turning into gold, except for draft picks. Like, he's got to have some improvement there. But when you talk about the free agency class and the free agents that he's able to plug in, he's been phenomenal. He should be executive of the year just for that. Just for that. Jonathan Grenard, another impactful player. Shaq Griffin has really bolstered the depth of his team. He's had his moments. He had his moment last week against Kirk Cousins. Solid cornerback, not lighting it up, not a shutdown corner, not what he was back in the day, but again, another solid addition that is contributing to this 2024 Minnesota Vikings team. When you start adding all these pieces together, it's no wonder why they're 11-2. I mean, think of the impact. Go back when you look at the 13 games that the Minnesota Vikings have played and the names that I've mentioned so far. I got more for you. Think about how impactful some of these guys have been in their moments during some of the games. I mean, it's been incredible. Camus Grugier Hill. When Ivan Pace went out early in the year, we thought that was a big loss, and it is a big loss. Ivan Pace is on IR right now. It's still a big loss. But here's where free agency, you're not always going to get the highly touted free agent out there that everybody wants you to get. So you bring a guy in like Hill that can fill in for you when somebody goes down. He adds depth, and he arguably had two of the best games of his career when he needed to step up. And our starting linebacker was out. This is someone that has not been lighted up in years, doesn't have the sexy name, but when the Minnesota Vikings called upon him when Ivan Pace went out, he came in and did the do. And he's doing the same thing now. How impactful has that guy been in his moments, in the moments where he's had opportunities? How impactful has he been? Is this the greatest free agency class ever in the history of the league? If not, throw another one up there. And I'm talking about top to bottom. I'm not talking about a couple of names. I'm not talking about a couple of names, 2 or 3 names for a team. I'm talking about a class of free agents where, the odds are against you. The more guys you bring in, the more guys that are probably apt to not pan out or may not be worth the contract that you signed them for. But the Minnesota Vikings seem to be hitting home runs. How about this one? They reach across the border and snag Aaron Jones. Almost as soon as Aaron Jones was released for Jacobs. The Minnesota Vikings went in, snatched him up, because they had to improve the rushing game. Now think about it. He had his pick of probably 20-plus teams out there that would have loved Aaron Jones' services, but he came across the border to, at the time, the enemy, into a great culture. And he's had fumbling issues for the past couple of games, but you can't say that our running game has not improved this year from what it was when we had Madison. Think about the big plays that Aaron Jones has made this year. Oh, I wanted him to get in the end zone against Lambeau so he could do the bank vault. That's what he was going to call his leap, the bank vault. I wanted one for him in Lambeau really bad. Unfortunately, he couldn't get one, but he's had a pretty solid year. If he could get the fumbling under control, UP Nation, what a stellar season he has had for the Minnesota Vikings. Again, another solid signing. Here's one for you. Jerry Tillery. Jerry Tillery is helping to fortify one of the best run defenses in the league, although it didn't show great against the Atlanta Falcons for the most part. I'm looking at the whole body of work for the Minnesota Vikings defense. They had the number 1 run defense for pretty much the majority of the year. Jerry Tillery is a big part of that. There weren't a lot of teams knocking down the door to get Jerry Tillery. During the offseason, there were a few teams, but there wasn't a lot of teams. And again, the identification, Kwesi Adolfo Mensah, I'm sure he's getting a lot of advice from B-Flow, talking to B-Flow, conversating to B-Flow. Who do you want me to bring in? But to be able to go out and actually put the pen to paper and sign these guys is absolutely stellar, man. This is the best free agency class ever in the league. Listen to these names. Andrew Van Ginkel. You could argue that he's up for Defensive Player of the Year. The Miami Dolphins didn't want to sign him anymore. Had a relationship with B-Flow when B-Flow was with the Dolphins. Now Andrew Van Ginkel, Mr. Pick 6. You better watch him at the line of scrimmage when he drops in the cover. He can read those little screen passes pretty well. And if you sleep on him, he can take it to the house for 6. He almost got Cousins twice. In the Atlanta Falcons game, he almost got Cousins twice for a pick 6. Oh, I wanted him to get that really bad. But Andrew Van Ginkel, you could argue he's our best defensive player this year. He's in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year. Think about all these names. Self-reflect. Think about how impactful all of these guys have been. When have you ever seen a free agency class on any team in the NFL like this? Educate me if there's another NFL free agency team out there in the years since 1993 when free agency was instituted. Educate me if there is another free agency class in any team in the NFL that has been more impactful than this class with the Minnesota Vikings. I'm going a step further than saying they're the best the Minnesota Vikings have ever brought in. I know that. There's no question about that. But I'm talking about the league. Is there another free agency class that has been in the league? Jihad Ward, how many big plays and big moments has Jihad Ward had this year? Another free agent for the Minnesota Vikings. Again, was this a guy that a lot of teams wanted his services and was knocking down his door? There were a couple teams, there were a few teams, but again, the sale point. Kwesi Adolfo Mensah, B-Flow, KOC, the culture, the reputation of the team, the reputation of the culture. Another stout free agent. Listen, man, there's a lot of guys that I could talk about, but this thing would go for 3 hours if I did that. I mean, from Romo to Kicker to Redmond, the moves that the front office are making for the Minnesota Vikings, and this wasn't a free agent move, this was a trade, but just the acquisition of Cam Robinson when Darrisaw went down, man, that could have put a monkey wrench in the whole season. Kwesi went out, quickly brought in Cam Robinson, and I'm not trying to sit here and say Cam Robinson is better than Darrisaw, because we know that he's not better than Darrisaw. But you're not seeing any problems from the left side of that line in terms of pressure getting home consistently. It's not happening, so that was a great move. And I was thinking about this in my car the other day. Has there been another free agency class? I know there's been some sexy signings from year to year for a lot of teams bringing in some free agents. And, a lot of that stuff gets on SportsCenter and whatever. But I honestly, sometimes those signings kind of pan out. Sometimes it's a train wreck. Remember when the Commanders, way back in the day when they signed Dion and brought all those guys in, and it was just a mess. Sometimes when you sign all those sexy names, it just doesn't work out. But what the Minnesota Vikings have done during the offseason, with no doubt, Kwesi is executive of the year. Man, if I'm wrong, somebody out there educate me on another class of free agents that have been as impactful as the free agents for the Minnesota Vikings this year. You're talking about a defensive player that could be up for Defensive Player of the Year in Van Ginkel, and you talk about Sam Darnold, who everybody right now is talking about. Give him the contract. Sign him up for multiple years. In the conversation for the MVP, Sam Darnold. It's unbelievable, man. It's just unbelievable. This class is unbelievable. I can't wait to watch the Vikings, the Minnesota Vikings, get down in the Winter Warrior game against the Chicago Bears. I am very interested to see tonight if Sam Darnold can build off of that superb game that he had against Kirk Cousins. What do you think, UP Nation? Give me your thoughts. Put it in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button, man. This is going to be a wild one against the Chicago Bears, but I just wanted to get on here and talk about if you thought or if you think that this class is the best free agency signing class ever in the NFL. If you don't think so, damn sure has to be an argument for it. And this class has to be in the conversation. But I'm interested in hearing your thoughts. This has been Unconventional Playbook. Again, please hit that like and subscribe button. I'll make sure to see you when I see you. LaTrey, take us home, man.
I don't know who I am. Can I say I'm a man? Am I losing my mind? Am I wasting my time? Do I know who I am?